developed new and maintained existing partnerships, and been involved in diversification of funding sources, establishing one of the largest budgets in its almost 50-year history. Over the past 17 years, Mr. Quintana has served Indian country with a focus on economic development, workforce training, marketing and community outreach, along with increasing access to health and wellness. Joseph has served 3 Native nations and worked on projects funded by federal and state awards, such as the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Health Service, U.S. Department of Labor, Housing and Urban Development, and Joseph has also managed a nonprofit public publication with subscriptions across the United States, including foreign countries in Germany, France, and Australia. Joseph plans on continuing to serve the needs of the American Indian community and is an active participant in many of the cultural and family-oriented activities in Los Angeles. For Joseph Quintana, the chairman of the U.S. Department of Labor Federal Advisory Committee for Native American Employment and Training Council. Joseph.
Wow, good morning, Ms. Kawatsi. Thank you, Kay. I appreciate that. I was wondering who she was talking about. I almost couldn't believe it. Thank you so much. You know, I really want to start by thanking those community members from the Gila River Indian community who've really been terrific hosts. I mentioned yesterday how us in Indian country, when we're really good hosts, we take care of one another. We make sure that we're fed. We make sure that we're clothed and we're heated when it gets cold out. And so I definitely want you to join me in thanking Governor Lewis, whom we heard at the start of this great conference on Tuesday, and of course Monica Antone, the Lieutenant Governor. I know both of them and many of their tribal representatives, and they are so supportive of everything we seek to do in Indian country. And so will you do me a favor? Will you join me in a round of applause, not only for them, but also those staff workers who continue to provide us resources and services throughout the last few days. We were talking about this earlier this morning, about the biggest resources and services that we needed this morning was some good coffee, and I think that we got that. I hope that you agree. I also want to thank our host committee of K7 and Jolene Nelson. They have done a terrific job in ensuring that we continue to be actively hearing from those people who are addressing the concerns within workforce development and training. They're making sure that we have a modern education. We know that we're coming out of a global pandemic. We know that everything isn't the way that it should be. But what can we do to overcome those obstacles and gaps and challenges that we can continue to see every day? And so, will you join me again in sharing a terrific round of applause for K7 and Jolene Nelson? Now, it's important for us to understand, of course, who our leadership is. I mentioned yesterday that we have, over the past few years, remained invisible when it comes to our leadership. It's important that every single one of our awardees know the direction that we're headed. Know that there's stability at the top. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have every answer, that we have every problem solved, but instead, we can rely on one another to overcome any of those challenging questions that continue to keep us up at night. And so I'm going to share a brief PowerPoint presentation. Now I know we've worked, a little over 2 years during the global pandemic, and we have relied quite a bit on technology. I haven't seen, the most I've seen many of you is on 2D, on a screen looking at me. But we know that technology can fail us when we need it most. So, of course, you'll be viewing some of my slides here, but please be patient if we run into any challenge or any obstacles going forward. Next slide, please. So, of course, we want to understand what the challenges of our members are. Rather than us always continuously dictating what is happening in the workforce development and training grounds, we should instead be listening to you. We should instead be having those conversations with those people not only doing the good work on the ground, but we should also be hearing directly from our community members themselves, finding every opportunity for them to become empowered, to uplift themselves. Because I think that our failure is that oftentimes we can become dismissive of our community members, that they don't know what the challenges are. But I think if you spend no more than 15 to 20 minutes with them, that you understand that they understand what their realities are, and that they know some of the things that we can do to overcome those challenges. And so those are some of the things that we want to work to address. And of course, being able to find better avenues of communication between each one of you. No matter what region of the country that you reside, that we understand that you have certain levels of expertise that are important for us. Not only for now, not only in the present, but long term, in order for us to be successful. There's no cookie cutter solution that's going to address every issue on every reservation or every urban Indian community. Just in the state of California alone, 90% of the overall American Indian community now resides in urban centers. So imagine the great deal of challenges that reside there that looks drastically different than what we may see here in the state of Arizona or other places. Also, I mentioned this before, how do we utilize the expertise that's in the room? We know that there's been tremendous amount of history and there's a great deal of dedicated work and service by you all. And we need to be able to seek that out. Who are the people that don't have a voice in this room? That we make sure that we call on you in one way or the other. Not everybody's comfortable speaking in public, of course, and raising their hand. But what can we do to make sure that if you have advice, if you saw a challenge that we need to overcome, that you're able to bring that to our attention so we can work on addressing it together. And then, of course, how to effectively make sure that we manage, that you actually see progress from us. We can speak all day. We're from Indian country. We can talk and talk and talk. But I don't know about you, but I'd like to see some action. There's one of the states in the union, what is their motto, their state motto, they call themselves the show me state. And that's how I feel. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see some, at least progress from year to year. And I think that's what we've charged this particular council to do, and we have a great team in order to get that done. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. Next slide, please. Looking at establishing mutuality and respect. And it really has to start at the top. I mentioned yesterday that we want to establish an overall group that's one voice, that we're building as a vessel, something that's cohesive. We have the ability to do that. It's not pitting one group against the other group. It's not pitting reservation natives against urban natives or anybody else. And instead, us thinking about this as far as the challenges that we all see and addressing the issues together. You see this particular image here. This is the leadership team, our executive team, which includes myself as chairman, but our vice chair, K7. I'll tell you what about K7. If I ever wanted anything done in Indian country, I know who to go to. She is somebody who can get things done. And those are the types of people we need at the top, who work extra hours, who will go the extra mile, who will see things through, and who will push you and push me. Those are some things that I very much value about Kay and her leadership, and very thankful for that. And of course, Robert Boulay, who's our secretary, works out of the Bad River Indian community. He, of course, isn't here with us today, but one of the things that we've asked him to do is make sure that we continue to be in constant contact with one another, that we hold ourselves accountable, that we also remain transparent with our members. I know recently it was brought to my attention that some of our members weren't participating as they should. And those are things that we should be addressing. How can we best make sure that we're hearing the concerns of all of our members and that there's active participation? They're representatives of you. We should hear from them. Next slide. And overall, our team. Hopefully you've had a chance at one point during your work to meet some of these individuals. And if you haven't, I hope that those folks who are in the room actually, let me pause here and ask, are there any Native American Employment and Training Council members here? If you are, will you please stand? Only one? Only Kay? Well, that's okay, because there's at least two people in the room that you can grab us, you can shake our hand, you can tell us who you are, you can give us your name, what part of the country you're from, you can tell us some of the concerns that you have. If you're not able to do it right now, let's figure out a way that we can come back to it in the future. And I think Kay would agree that this is the opportune time to do it. I know this might be the last day, but what can we do to make sure that these connections continue into the future? And I think that we have the ability to do that. But there's over 17 members across the United States who represent 6 different regions, including Alaska and Hawaii. These are all important things to know. These are important faces to know, because they represent you. When we go and we speak to the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, and we're presenting ideas, we need to know what challenges we're seeing on the ground, but we also need to know what successes we can also share. Of course, we want everything to be presented, good and bad, but ways that we can best identify our partnership with DOL as a means to get things done, as I mentioned before. And of course, being able to provide him the advisement that he needs in order to make the best decisions forward. We know that working with the federal government comes with its limitations. Is it always easy? No. Lived by certain proposals that we've submitted even during the global pandemic? Yes. It presents its own challenges. What are ways that right now we can address issues that may impact 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road? So not only do our members and our young people have a little bit brighter future, but we can impact future generations down the road. Next slide, please. Next slide. And so we actually developed certain goals and strategies that we want to address. One of those was, of course, building stronger partnerships. We wanted to silo bust. We get so comfortable sitting in just the areas that we know and that we prefer that it makes it difficult to build bridges. We have an established new role within Jack Jackson, who's able to assist us with that, who can assist us with intergovernmental partnerships. Having a direct access to the White House. Imagine this particular body having that support, that we're working with the President's office as we speak, working with BIA, working with Commerce, working with all the groups who actively engage with our communities to make sure that they understand the needs of our workers, so we can make sure that they have access to those jobs. When we're talking about Biden's infrastructure bill, making sure that our members aren't left out, that they actually have the ability to be competitive for those jobs and those positions. Not that they're given to them, not that they're just handed to them, but that they actually have the ability to be successful in those roles, not just for now, but long-term career advancement in the future. And of course, another important to us more than anything is like gold is data collection. How do we better collect data? How do we store it? How do we make it better, easily accessible for our members? Not just so that executive leaders have it, but that at any point in time, you have the ability to go in and see where we're at real time. Whether or not it's in regards to unemployment, whether or not it's how we're seeing we can break it up by different regions in the country. Those are things that we're all seeking to have access to. Next slide. In creating a structure, a stable structure. Now more than ever, we're coming out of a global pandemic, but also what are we also coming out of? Finally coming out of a place of racial equity and justice. We're not insulated from that. We also understand that for us to find equality as a whole, we have to be truthful. Truthful as far as what the challenges are within the Native community. Also truthful in regards to our histories. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. Next step, please. And then overall, like I mentioned before, increase in communications. Not only within our council's level, but also within each one of you. Making sure that you have access to understanding and knowing where this particular council is working in. What we're seeking to address. What new opportunities have we been able to present to the Department of Labor? So we'll show how we're going to do that in a moment. Next slide, please. So most recently, I know this is taking some time, and I don't know if you've ever worked with councils before, but it can be challenging. You have many different people with different varying levels of expertise. You would think we would all agree, wouldn't you? But that really isn't oftentimes the case. That's important for us to developing the best plan that we can. And so we actually just formalized our own strategic plan and focused it around 3 primary pillars. The first pillar is in regards to infrastructure development, making sure that we have a strong foundation to make sure that we have something to build upon long term. And we will do that. We know that too. The announcement was made yesterday in regards to our division chief, Dana Brown, will be retiring at the end of the year. As she should. How much has she given to all of us? She should enjoy those opportunities. But now to make sure that we bring in somebody, not just with the credentials. There's so many qualified people out there who would be suitable for the role, but somebody who fits the needs of this particular body. Somebody who understands Indian country. Somebody who already has built legitimacy and trust in order to make sure that we not only continue the next few years, but that we're thinking long term. I think the strategic plan also holds this council accountable. It makes sure that each of you has an opportunity to go in and look at it, see how we're working to address certain challenges that we're facing. Next tab, please. The other is training and technical assistance. As I mentioned numerous times, it's very easy to talk about the successes. It's difficult when we have to look at ourselves and look inward and to see about what are the obstacles and challenges that continue to present themselves for us, including seeing our members leave us and continuing to see numbers drop. Those are questions that those are issues that we need to address. They're not easy, but I think that the answer is really in this room. There are so many people in this room who can offer those highlights of what we can do to best prepare. Next tab, please. And then, as I mentioned before, increase the visibility. Making sure that not only do you all know where we're headed, but that we also have buy-in from tribal leaders. Last week, we actually met to coincide with the National Congress of American Indians annual conference in Sacramento. This was done on purpose because we wanted to invite some of the tribal leaders out to our meetings, and that we could actually attend some of the meetings that were happening at the Safe Center in Sacramento. And we actually delivered a presentation about building a workforce of tomorrow that's inclusive of Native people, which was well attended. These were conversations that were very much, had a great deal of importance with those tribal leaders. And we can continue to build this. No tribal leader should ever say, I don't know what Department of Labor does. I don't know what the Native American Employment and Training Council does. And if they do, we should do everything in our power to make sure that we help educate them. Because they are our best supporters, they are our best advocates. They also provide legitimacy in why we should continue the work that we do. Next slide, please. Within this particular council, we have established 4 different work groups. These are subgroups within our council. And so these work groups include the effective management team, which is a makeup of every single council member. Every single council member could join this particular work group. And these address major issues and conversations that are happening at the council level. The council only meets twice a year. We could meet as much as 3 times a year, but right now we meet twice a year. Previously, we've met once in DC and then one to coincide with the National Congress of American Indians. You all may be asking, well, why in DC? Well, DC is where everything is happening. It's also where the Department of Labor is. It also gives us an opportunity where we can go and visit congressional leaders and folks on the Hill, making sure that they are aware of the challenges that we continue to see on the ground. Also, another work group is census. You know, recently I visited with the director of the census. His name is Robert Santos. And for him, it was almost like eye-opening to hear about the challenges that we see in Indian country. He's the director of the U.S. Census. And then they wonder why our numbers are so low. Why are we not actively engaged in ACS? How have we not gotten buy-in? And those are issues that we can help address on our level, while also talking about some of the data collection points that they can help us achieve, including how many people are homeowners, annual median income, how many people actually are wage earners, things like that. Another is performance and reporting. This, of course, should we be looking at what we were doing just 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Sure, if it works. But what if we are continuously seeing challenges? What if new data needs to be presented? This is a way that we can help overcome some of those barriers. And then, of course, lastly, something that's important, that's near and dear to all of us, is the youth. Is making sure that our young people have advantages that we didn't and that our grandparents did. When we talk about history, that we're also looking ahead at the future. Making sure that our young people are prepared for modern technology. That they're prepared for a more competitive job market. That they can see themselves not only as the food server, which is nothing wrong with food service, but then they can see themselves as the manager, as the division or the region manager, as being the business owner, which I believe we're going to hear about here a little bit after me, which I'm very much interested to hear. And so we have that opportunity in regards to also overcoming gaps in educational achievement too. When I think about educational achievement, I don't think necessarily about you just getting a nice paper and framing it and putting it in your office. But there's varying levels of education that we can also work to address, including pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeships, or just making sure that we are all literate, that we can read, that we can write, that we can take dictation, that there are so many other jobs that can be presented to us if we have that skill set. Next slide, please. So some challenges. We can't talk about what we want to overcome without not talking about some of the challenges that continue to present themselves. One of those not listed up here is continuous cycles of poverty. We show tremendous cycles of poverty across Indian country. When I talk about cycles, about 3 generations of our families have been impacted by poverty. I know because I'm one of them. Also talking about those high rates of unemployment that continue to plague our communities. Across the United States, I mentioned the national average on unemployment is right about 3.9%. American Indian communities across the U.S., the average is more than 3 times that. Why are we not talking more about that when we're talking about our economy? And so those are some of the issues that we do want to address. But we also understand the criminalization of poverty. How many of our peoples can't get a job because of something that happened 15 years ago? How many of our young people, they make a mistake in their careers, they're severely impacted the rest of their lives.
That's right.
No matter how much they go out to get an education, no matter how much they want to come and serve their communities, we now become more bureaucratic than the bureaucrats because we're willing to limit them in their ability to have those jobs. Who are the major employers on our lands? Tribal government, healthcare sector. Imagine how many limitations come with those roles. Our young people, no, I don't know about you all, but I'm a lot different than I was 10, 15 years ago. My perspective on my worldview has changed quite a bit. I can't be considered the same person that I was then. We grow. And that's what we have to think about our own peoples. Rather than thinking it in a Western context where you have to be perfect. You have to be squeaky clean in order for you to get that position in leadership. But we always are looking at a balance and a harmony that we're trying to attain. That you always can go off that road, but you always have the ability to come back to it. And I think we have that ability to overcome those challenges and see our workers in a way that makes sense for us, rather than us continuously having to change who we are for others. Also, the inability to create access to assets. We, of course, are trying to make sure that our members understand financial literacy. It's one thing to have a bank account. It's one thing to have a savings account. One thing to build towards retirement. But it's a completely another thing, for asset achievement, for you to be able to own a home. How many of our members across our regions are impacted by housing prices? Owning a home, that's nothing more than a dream to us. It's not a reality. But how can we best prepare our members for owning things? And making sure that there's generational wealth, that it transfers down, trickles down to our kids and to our grandkids. And of course, another issue that continues to present itself is the labor problem. People may be asking, well, what's the labor problem? Well, when we always talk about what's happening in the labor market, it's usually the businesses who are saying, it's not us, we want to hire more, but the labor market is asking for more wages. They're asking for more resources. And they put the onus on the labor market. But the labor market right now is dictating where things are going. Imagine how many of us are facing challenges in trying to get people hired. Because now our people are starting to say, no, I want better conditions, I want better wages. Which they should. They should want better. They should be able to garner what they can. And so those are some of the issues that we're currently trying to address. Next slide, please. And I know some of this is getting long, so I will be mindful of that. But in order for us to move forward, we also have to understand the past. We can't not think about moving forward. As I was thinking about yesterday, not only were we looking at elections, but what was also happening that same morning. The Supreme Court was meeting about, not everybody at once, Indian Child Welfare Act. And how many of these continue to be targeted? Not only by the state of Texas, but also there's specific interest groups that are seeking to target these things. And if you happen to listen to the hours of conversation, I don't know about you all, if you like to listen to lawyers speak back and forth without understanding the word that they're saying. But them talking about whether or not the government has rights not only for tribal lands, but also tribes that are living outside the reservation, which came up for discussion. Imagine if that conversation were brought up in regards to resources pertaining to workforce development and training, how that would impact our communities. But it wasn't anything new. Poverty isn't anything new to our people. We all know that. But if we look back to the 1800s, where American Indian children were being removed and placed into boarding schools all across the United States, we would understand why some of that historical trauma continues to remain with us. Why American Indians were presented with relocation during the 1950s, taken into places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Phoenix, the oldest Indian center here in Phoenix. We understand why those places were created. You can see that in some of the images here. They're hard to see because there are people. But it's the reality that we continue to address. We see why we have cycles of poverty. We also understand why our members don't see themselves as the lawyer, as the doctor, as the head of the boardroom, as the tribal leader. But they've never had an example of it. Next slide. So those are some issues that we do, of course, need to address. Also continuing to make sure that we strengthen our ties to the tribes themselves, and also while doing that, building relationships with the urban centers. All the tribal members don't live on reservation communities. They also live in places like Los Angeles and Phoenix and others. Tribal leaders also have to understand what is happening on the ground, what the experiences of their tribal citizens are while they're there. We have the ability to build that relationship and continue that. And while we're in places like here in Phoenix or Tulsa or wherever it might be, that we don't just find ourselves at the conference location, but we're actually reaching out to places like when we're in Tulsa visiting the Cherokee Nation, visiting the Sacafox Nation or the Skokie Creek Nation, and talking to them, what is happening here? What are you seeing in regards to the labor market or the business sectors? What are the challenges that we can help you overcome? I know one of those was talking about how the necessity of creating opportunities for better education and training. They have the members, but they need to have on-the-ground experience. And they'd love to build that connection with places like Phoenix or like Los Angeles in order to overcome it. Next slide, please. Making sure that we, of course, not only are thinking about those people who are successful, those people with potential. We know that those people are few and far in between. But, you know, it's really a testament in regards to the work that you all do and the testament of the work that you all have done in your careers. You all have overcome and broken barriers and or glass barriers and glass ceilings that have limited our ability to see ourselves in certain roles. And as much as we think about those people who have overcome, we have to also think about those people who are voiceless. Those people who are experiencing homelessness as we speak. Imagine a homeless person here in our own land. Or thinking about those people who are illiterate. Thinking about those people who can't read or write. Those people who are victims of substance abuse, who have been victims of domestic violence, battery, or rape. We're their voice. We're the ones who are supposed to be providing them hope as well. And I think we have the ability to do that moving forward. Next slide, please. Looking at how we can then expand into dignity, or create dignity in labor. No matter what the position, no matter what job it might be, that we find dignity in all we do. Whether or not you sit in a nice, cushy office and you have air conditioning blowing in your face all day, or if you have somebody who lives in a multi-family home, multi-generational home, they're their only wage earner, they take with them every day a great deal of stress when they leave that door because they don't know whether or not they're going to get fired or laid off. And if they get laid off, how are they going to tell the rest of their family? We can't pay rent. We might get foreclosed on. We might be out on the streets. Instead, we need to look at dignity and finding every type of work we do, whether or not it's construction, it's a healthcare sector. What if not if we're cleaning streets? That we're the best at that job. And that we hold ourselves in a respectful position because we have work, we have the ability to provide. Not work for work's sake, not just so I can tell somebody, hey, I got a job, but there's no passion behind it, that you don't necessarily have a love for the things that you do. Instead, we want to be able to help instill that. Next slide, please. And of course, what kind of future do we want? What kind of future do we want? And those are questions that we not only need to ask each other, but that we can answer together. And I'll end on this because I know I'm short of time. But you know, there's two things that come to mind in the work that you all do, and you all should be thanked for everything you have done coming out of this global pandemic. You have really kept each of us together, kept our communities together. There's two things that come to mind. It's in regards to faith and in regards to hope. You know, faith, I don't think of it as being in the religious context. There's nothing wrong, nothing in regards to Christianity or anything else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something that's tangible. I think the faith that we have, that we can go out and do this work, is each one of you. It's the faith and the trust that we have established with each other. It's also the faith that we have built within our community members who see something in us that we can help guide them and we can help build them up. And I know many of you are like me. We're all in the business of hope. We want to hope for a better tomorrow. We want hope for better opportunities. We want hope that we can continue as we want to be. But really, that hope really starts with each one of you. It starts with our ability to make sure that our members feel like they matter. That the work that they do matters. Like what they want to do for their lives matters. And together we will present a hopeful future, not just for our community members, but also in this great partnership that we have established with the U.S. Department of Labor. I want to thank you all for the work that you all continue to do. Many blessings to you and safe travels. Thank you all.